Salve, alcateia. O vídeo de hoje será mais crítico e objetivo, talvez chocante para alguns, mas um conhecimento necessário para todos os homens, sejam estes ligados ou não a essa droga virtual diabólica chamada pornografia. Hoje lhes apresento Theodore Robert Bundy, ou mais conhecido como Ted Bundy, que foi nada mais nada menos que um serial killer que agiu entre a década de 70 e 80, cometeu os piores crimes, dentre esses estupro, sequestro e assassinato, e foi condenado e morto em 1989. Um dos fatos mais intrigantes desse homem foi revelado no seu último depoimento, quando mesmo diz que o seu vício compulsivo por pornografia foi um dos seus maiores estímulos para os seus feitos. Bom, acho que nem preciso falar nada. Porém, eu vejo que muitas pessoas insistem em discutir sobre o fato, insistem em falar que a pornografia não faz nenhum dano ao cérebro. Bom, assista esse vídeo, fique com esse depoimento e tirem essas conclusões.
So much grief, so much sorrow, so much pain for so many people. Where did it start? How did this moment come about? Let's go back then to those roots. First of all, you, as I understand it, were raised in what you consider to have been a healthy home.
Absolutely.
You were not physically abused, you were not sexually abused, you were not emotionally abused.
No, no way. And that's part of the tragedy of this whole situation, is because I grew up in a wonderful home with two dedicated and loving parents, one of 5 brothers and sisters. A home where we as children were the focus of my parents' lives, where we regularly attended church, 2 Christian parents who did not drink, they did not smoke, there was no gambling, there was no physical abuse or fighting in the home. I'm not saying this was Leave It to Beaver.
It wasn't a perfect home.
No, I don't know that such a home exists, but it was a fine, solid Christian home, and nobody, I hope no one will try to take the easy way out and to try to blame or otherwise accuse my family of contributing to this, because I know, and I'm trying to tell you as honestly as I know what happened, and I think this is a message I want to get across. But as a young boy, and I mean a boy of 12, 13, certainly, that I encountered outside the home again, in the local grocery store, or the local drugstore, the softcore pornography, what people call softcore. But as I think I explained to you last night, Dr. Dobson, in an anecdote, that as young boys do, we explored the back roads and sideways and byways of our neighborhood, and oftentimes people would dump the garbage and whatever they were cleaning out of their house, and from time to time we'd come across pornographic books of a harder nature than more graphic, you might say, more explicit nature than we would encounter, let's say, in your local grocery store. And this also included such things as, let's say, detective magazines and more hard.
Those that involve violence.
Yes, and and this is something I think I want to emphasize, is the most damaging kinds of pornography. Again, I'm talking from personal experience. Hard, real, personal experience. The most damaging kinds of pornography are those that involve violence and sexual violence, because the wedding of those two forces, as I know only too well, brings about behavior that is just too terrible to describe.
Now walk me through that. What was going on in your mind?
The question and the issue is how this kind of literature contributed and helped mold and shape the kinds of violent behavior.
It fueled your fantasies, didn't it?
Well, in the beginning it fuels this kind of thought process. Then at a certain time it's instrumental in what I would say crystallizing it, making into something which is almost like a separate entity inside. And at that point you're at the verge, or I was at the verge, of acting out on these kinds of thoughts.
Now I really want to understand that. You had gone about as far as you could go in your own fantasy life with printed material, and you made or printed and video or film or
film,
photos,
magazines,
yeah.
what have you. Yeah.
And then there was the urge to take that little step or big step over to a physical event.
And it happens, it happened in stages, gradually. It doesn't necessarily, not to me at least, happen overnight. My experience with, I'd say, pornography generally, but with pornography that deals on a violent level with sexuality, is that once you become addicted to it, and I look at this as a kind of addiction, like other kinds of addiction, I would keep looking for more potent, more explicit, more graphic kinds of material. Like an addiction, you keep craving something which is harder, something which gives you a greater sense of excitement, until you reach the point where the pornography only goes so far. You reach that jumping off point where you begin to wonder if maybe actually doing it will give you that which is beyond just reading about it or looking at it.
How long did you stay at that point before you actually assaulted someone?
We're talking about an influence that is the influence of violent types of media and violent pornography, which was an indispensable link in the chain of behavior, the chain of events that led to the behaviors, to the assaults, to the murders, and what have you.
Understand it now. There's this battle going on within. There are the conventions that you've been taught. There's the right and wrong that you learned as a child, and then there is this unbridled passion fueled by your plunge into hardcore violent pornography, and those things are at war with each other.
Yes.
And then with the alcohol diminishing the inhibitions, you let go.
Well, virtually everyone can be exposed to so-called pornography, and while they're aroused to it to one degree or another, not go out and do anything wrong.
Well, addictions are like that. They affect some people more than they affect others.
Well,
but there is a percentage of people affected by hardcore pornography in a very violent way, and you're obviously one of them. Ted, after you committed your first murder, what was the emotional effect on you? What happened in the days after that?
I can only liken it to after, I don't want to over-dramatize it, but to have been possessed by something so awful and so alien, and then the next morning wake up from it, remember what happened, and realize that basically, in the eyes of the law, certainly in the eyes of God, you're responsible. I want people to understand this too, and I'm not saying this gratuitously because it's important people understand this, that basically I was a normal person. I wasn't some guy hanging out at bars or a bum, or I wasn't a pervert in the sense that, people look at somebody and say, I know there's something wrong with him, and just tell. I was essentially a normal person. I had good friends. I led a normal life, except for this one small but very potent and very destructive segment of it that I kept very secret and very close to myself and didn't let anybody know about it. Those of us who have been so much influenced by violence in the media, in particular pornographic violence, are not some kinds of inherent monsters. We are your sons and we are your husbands. And we grew up in regular families, and pornography can reach out and snatch a kid out of any house today. It snatched me out of my home 20, 30 years ago. And as diligent as my parents were, and they were diligent in protecting their children, there is no protection against the kinds of influences that are loose in the society that tolerates.
You really feel that hardcore pornography and the doorway to it, softcore pornography, is doing untold damage to other people and causing other women to be abused and killed the way you did others?
Listen, I'm no social scientist, and I haven't done a survey. I don't pretend that I know what John Q. Citizen thinks about this. But I've lived in prison for a long time now. And I've met a lot of men who have been who were motivated to commit violence just like me. And without exception, every one of them was deeply involved in pornography, without question, without exception, deeply influenced and consumed by an addiction to pornography. There's no question about it. The FBI's own study on serial homicide shows that the most common interest among serial killers is pornography.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's real. It's true. Even if they don't believe my expression of sorrow and remorse, will believe what I'm saying now, that there is loose in their towns and their communities people like me today whose dangerous impulses are being fueled day in and day out by violence in the media in its various forms, particularly sexualized violence. And what scares me, and let's come into the present now, because what I'm talking about happened 20, 30 years ago, that is, in my formative stages. And what scares and appalls me, Dr. Dobson, is when I see what's on cable TV, some of the movies, I mean, some of the violence in the movies that come into homes today with stuff that they wouldn't show in X-rated adult theaters 30 years ago. This stuff,
The slasher movies that you're talking about.
that stuff is, I'm telling you, from personal experience, the most, that is graphic violence on screen, particularly as it gets into the home to children who may be unattended or unaware that they may be a Ted Bundy who has that vulnerability to that predisposition to be influenced by that kind of behavior, by that kind of movie, that kind of violence. There are kids sitting out there switching the TV dial around and come upon these movies late at night, or I don't know when they're on, but they're on and any kid can watch them. It's scary when I think what would have happened to me if I had seen. I mean, scary enough. I mean, that I just ran into stuff outside the home, but to know that children are watching that kind of thing today, or can pick up their phone and dial away for it or send away for it, I think society deserves to be protected from me and from others like me, that's for sure. I think what I hope will come of our discussion is I think society deserves to be protected from itself, because as we've been talking, there are forces at loose in this country, particularly again this kind of violent pornography, where on the one hand, well-meaning, decent people will condemn behavior of a Ted Bundy while they're walking past a magazine rack full of the very kinds of things that send young kids down the road to be Ted Bundys. That's the irony. We're talking here not just about more. We're talking, what I'm talking about is going beyond retribution, which is what people want with me, going beyond retribution and punishment, because there is no way in the world that killing me is going to restore those beautiful children to their parents and correct and soothe the pain. But I'll tell you, there are lots of other kids playing in streets around this country today who are going to be dead tomorrow and the next day and the next day and next month, because other young people are reading the kinds of things and seeing the kinds of things that are available in the media today.